This week on the Hollywood and Toto Podcast, well, Sydney Sweeney stood up to the woke mob. But did conservatives have her back? It's complicated. And we have not one but two cool interviews this week. First up is Joseph Holmes, who's behind the new film, Jim versus the Future. It's a head scratcher for sure. And he's got some great stories about how he made do with so much less. And then we also have a conversation with John Stalberg Jr. He's the man behind the Muzzle franchise. The new film is Muzzle, City of Wolves. And he'll share more about the creation of the film and also why it's almost impossible to make a movie in LA these days. It's depressing, but it's illuminating.
Welcome to the Hollywood and Toto Podcast. Entertainment news and reviews without the woke Hollywood narrative. Free speech, free expression. Now that's entertainment. And here's your host, award-winning film critic, Christian Toto.
Well, Sydney Sweeney survived. Now, of course, she's a young actress. There's no reason for her not to survive. I'm talking about the battles in the culture wars. Now, Sydney Sweeney was swept up in this just a few months ago when she starred in a commercial for American Eagle jeans. You've seen the spot. She quips that she's got good genes, or kind of gives a nudge, nudge, wink, wink to that effect, meaning not only is she wearing jeans that she's promoting, but also just look at her. She's lovely. She won the genetic lottery.
Hubba, hubba, hubba.
It's a pretty innocent joke in general and a nice hook for the commercial. But of course, the far left went berserk, saying, "This is about white supremacy. How dare you? You must apologize." And Sydney Sweeney said nothing. Bupkis. She just ignored it and went on with her life.
I've got better things to do than to play games with you.
But more recently, the subject came up again during an interview with a GQ interviewer. And it turns out this interviewer was as woke and as liberal as most journalists these days. So what happened? Well, she stood her ground. She didn't backtrack. She didn't apologize. And when it comes to political matters, she basically said, if I've got something to say, I'll say it when I want to say it. Now, if you think about this from most perspectives, it's a nothing burger on rye, isn't it? It's just a woman not bowing to an interviewer's question. But we live in complicated times. And of course, the woke mind virus has forced actors to bend the knee, to say what the left wants them to say, or else, or there's consequences. And she said nothing of the kind. She just went out, did her work, didn't apologize for it, and moved on. But still, that is brave. And just if you think it's not brave, think about the big-time actors and celebrities who have bowed to the woke mob, who have bent the knee. Talking about Scarlett Johansson, Halle Berry, Stephen King, many, many more. Those are three that just kind of jumped to mind for me. When the woke mob came for them, they said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I'll be an ally." They couldn't even stand tall for their own beliefs.
I'll do what you say.
And Sydney Sweeney did just that. Now, is Sydney Sweeney a conservative? Is she a MAGA fan? I have no idea. There was a story a few weeks ago saying that she was a registered Republican, but beyond that, we really know nothing. She hasn't come out stating anything positive or negative about the president, about any political positions in recent weeks or months or even years. We have no clue. She's just not interested in that part of her career. And God bless her. There's no reason to get involved. I mean, she could speak, she could not speak. It's up to her. But I think conservatives owe her a bit of gratitude. I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but this is the world we live in right now. And just not bowing to the woke mob, just saying what you want to say, standing up and refusing to bow and bend, that matters. It really does from a culture war perspective. And yet conservatives don't seem to have her back in any way. And I'll just mention two examples. One, she's had a string of recent films that have done very poorly at the box office, including Americana, Eden, and now her most recent film, Christy. And Christy, by the way, is very good. I haven't seen the other two, but this is a solid film with a great performance by Sydney. So they haven't supported her at the box office. They haven't said, my gosh, this is a woman who's basically sticking her neck out for sanity and not bowing, and maybe we should support her. That's my point of view. I think artists who are brave and bold deserve our consideration. And you could just mention Gina Carano, who was treated terribly by Disney. She was fired. She sued them. They came to some sort of agreement. But conservatives, by and large, have rallied around Gina. They said that was wrong what happened. Now, will they support her next project? I don't know, but that's where it gets a little tricky. I did a very informal survey on social media, X, my favorite destination. And I said, what is it about Sydney Sweeney and what she said? And do you think that conservatives should have her back? Should they support her new movie? Should they rally behind her in some ways? And the answers I got were basically, no, you're wrong, buzz off, and why should I bother? And actually, that bothers me as a conservative, as someone who looks at pop culture the way I do, because I think conservatives too often don't know how to handle pop culture. They ignore it. They refuse to engage with it. Now, part of that I get completely. A lot of Hollywood figures have said, I don't like you. I don't like the politicians you support. I don't like your values. And so there's a lot of animosity there. I get that. But the bottom line is simple. If there is anything right of center in the culture, if there's a movie, a TV show, an actor or actress who stands up and puts out a different kind of message, or maybe even a film or project that has heartland values, we really should rally behind it. Because if you don't, we'll get even less of it. So if you want to complain, oh my gosh, Hollywood doesn't understand me, Hollywood insults me, Hollywood puts out product that I don't like, and then Hollywood does, and you ignore it, that's sending a message saying, hey, Hollywood can keep on ignoring this community. They'll just keep making the movies that they've been doing for quite some time. And I think the same is true to a degree with Sydney Sweeney. She's not an out-and-out Republican. She's not crying for the conservative party to make progress, but she did stand her ground. She did stand tall. She did refuse to bend, and that really does matter. And again, if someone like Sydney Sweeney can be brave and strong, it sends a message to others in the artistic community that they can too. That's why these things are so important. It's why, looking back a couple of years ago, it was such a critical, consequential moment when Dave Chappelle and Netflix had that big issue where he told a few trans jokes. Now, Netflix could have thrown Dave under the bus. It could have disconnected ties with him. It could have said, we're not going to do business with him anymore. No, they basically told their Netflix employees who were upset about this to pound sand.
You're welcome to leave anytime you want.
And that was a really significant moment, because if Netflix essentially canceled Dave Chappelle, what about the other comedians? This guy's one of the biggest comedians in the world right now. Some call him the GOAT. That's a matter for agreement or disagreement. What if he couldn't stand up, if he couldn't say the jokes he wanted to tell? Now, again, this is around the early 2020s where a lot of people were being canceled. Artists were memory holding their own work, like Tina Fey with 30 Rock episodes, when they were blackface adjacent. This was a tricky time in our culture, and Dave Chappelle and Netflix stood tall. And I think that was a significant moment in the culture. And from there, we've gotten better and more free. So kudos to Sydney Sweeney for just standing her ground, for just being the person she wants to be, for not following the script that she's been forced to read. Nope, she didn't do it. But I really want conservatives, my fellow conservatives, to think about this moment, to think about why it matters, to think about why I'm even bringing it up in the first place. Because the culture wars are affecting everything. It affects the world we live in. It affects the culture, obviously, but it also affects our political scene. What President Donald Trump does sometimes really does matter above and beyond decisions, the jokes he tells, the memes he shares, the way he engages with Hollywood from time to time. These things matter today, and maybe it's silly and maybe it shouldn't, but it does. So I think we owe a debt of gratitude to Sydney Sweeney, young actress trying to make her way in the world, putting out a good performance in Christy. Maybe go check it out. First of all, you get a good film. There's no harm in that. Second of all, just show a little support to an actor who stood tall. I think she deserves it, and I think others who might just stand tall next do too. Joseph Holmes writes film reviews and cultural essays, but that didn't fully scratch his cultural itch. He wanted to make movies as well, but he doesn't have a lot of resources to do just that. He's not plugged into Sony or Universal or Paramount Pictures, but he's just an independent filmmaker who wanted to make movies on his terms. So he did so. He dialed back the budget. He realized what resources he had at his disposal, and he made a movie his way on his terms with his story. The film is called Jim versus the Future, and it's available now on Apple TV and YouTube and Amazon Prime. You can check it out in multiple VOD platforms. And it's a story about a young man who's considering breaking up with his girlfriend. It's rather serious, but this may be the time to kind of go in a different direction. But these figures magically enter his life that are from the future and who are tied to his relationship, whether it continues or whether it ends. And I don't want to say more than that because I don't want to spoil the story, because that's kind of part of the fun here. But this is just his way of looking at culture, relationships, and also spirituality. Again, the film is Jim versus the Future. And I was glad to have Joseph on the show to talk about the film, the corners he had to cut to make it happen, and why, you know what? If there's a will, there's a way. And it very sounds like a kind of a cliche of all cliches, but the filmmakers who want their stories to be told, they just get it done. Joseph got it done. It's called Jim versus the Future, and here's the story behind it. Well, Joseph, thanks for joining the show. You know, I always start with a very basic question when it comes to filmmakers, you know, the why connected to a certain film. And this one's certainly ambitious. It's thoughtful. When you talk about Jim versus the Future, was there a spark that ignited it? Was it a series of events? Give me the quick origin story, because I'm always fascinated by that.
Yeah, the origin story for this specifically was desperation. Because I have been wanting to make my first feature film for a long time, and I had a script, but I just didn't have the money to make the movie I wanted to make. So I had a producing partner, Nathan Clarkson, who's also my co-host on the Overthinkers podcast, and he told me straight up, like, look, you have enough money to have 5 actors in one location. So can you tell a story, make a movie with that? And so I sat down and was like, okay, you know, what story can I get excited about telling that does what I want to do, does what I want to add to the world as an artist, etc., but is in one location with 5 actors. And this story came out of that, where I said, well, this would be cool. This would be interesting to me. And, you know, again, as somebody who's been sort of a film critic, culture critic for a long time, I've also, you know, have been wanting to make movies and tell my own stories. And what I felt was not being in the space now was there's a lot of, say, you know, Christians and even non-Christians who are trying to tell stories, but not telling stories kind of in the way that I would want to see on screen, in the sense that there's a kind of way that a Christian in my generation imagines the world and wants to wrestle with the experiences and ideas it has in the world, that, you know, whether in sort of the faith-based industry, like they're very limited. Well, we can tell this kind of story about a person who their life sucks and they give their life to Jesus and then they reconcile with their friends and family. And then other people, it's like, okay, I want to tell an exciting story about heroes and danger and interesting ideas, but it's all from kind of the imagination of somebody who doesn't share kind of a more, you know, religious metaphysics. You know, I, you know, deal a lot in this movie with the multiverse, and, you know, one of our common modern kind of cultural myth of the multiverse, you know, has this idea of meaninglessness at the bottom of it. And so one of the things I had fun with doing is saying, like, is there telling a story that is metaphysical and says something about reality the way multiverse does, but does it in a way that's more reflective of my experience and how I imagine the world. So that's sort of the very specific inspiration of it, and then the larger goals of what I wanted to express.
Yeah. You mentioned you're a film critic as well. It's an interesting kind of to wear both hats, and obviously you can't take off one or the other. Do you find that being a critic helps you as a filmmaker? Does it make it a little more complicated? How do those two worlds kind of collide when it comes to the creative process?
That's a really good question. It's probably the question I get asked most often in connection to this. And I would say that I wish I remembered who told this to me or where I read it, but there's a phrase that I keep going back to, which is, you write drunk and edit sober. And, you know, what that means is that, you know, when you're doing a creative endeavor, you do what comes out of you naturally, what you're excited about. What you follow is like, this would be cool. You know, this is what's emotionally satisfying to me. And then when they're in the editing stage, you start picking it apart and analyzing it. And I think that being a film critic helps with the editing stage of it, because you know better than it. You have so much practice with the part of saying, okay, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't feel right. This is because you're looking at it as an audience. It's not, it's you yourself, but it's still an audience the way you have always done. But it is sometimes a struggle to just turn that part off when you're in the creative space of it.
Yeah.
When you want to say, this is just cool. This doesn't make any sense. It doesn't matter. It's just cool. Just go with it.
When I talk to a lot of independent filmmakers, and there's always the budget is this, we can't do more than that. And you've got to improvise. And you've got to you've made the setting more constricted where it allows you the freedom to tell the story you want to tell. But even that, I'm sure there were hiccups along the way, things you don't plan for. Was there anything along the way in this particular journey where you thought, oh, I wanted to do this, we just can't. But when you pivoted, it actually ended up being better for the film.
Yeah, there's actually a really cool story about that. Mm-hmm. One is the fact it's the location itself, because the location ended up being my apartment and my roommates. And what I originally was going to do was get an Airbnb, because there's like, okay, I can create a space that will be exactly the way I want it to look, and that I have the freedom to do that. And then, I found a place. It seemed like it was going to work. We were getting ready to do location scouting and, bring everything there to set up the world the way we wanted. And then, of course, the person who was on the Airbnb dropped off the Airbnb. And I was like, well, what's wrong? And then Airbnb said, hey, this person's, we're no longer affiliated with us. And I was like, okay, what am I going to do? And so then I realized, and I got more advice on this, like, could you possibly do this in your apartment? Where Nathan was like, again, he was a producing partner. Could you possibly do this in your apartment? And I was like, actually, I just lost a roommate who has just moved out. And so maybe I'll go to my other roommate and say, hey, can I pay the difference for this month that, I'd be shooting this film, so we don't get a roommate for that month. And then I get to use that as a green room. I can film here without disruption. And it ended up, again, like you talk about, God orchestrating things. It really was like the perfect timing that made it possible. And the apartment ended up, again, it was so much more convenient to do it where I lived and have people be there and not have to, go somewhere else or stay somewhere else. And it ended up, again, because it's, my roommate is an academic, he's a professor, and stuff like that, it's a movie about somebody who has all these books and all these spaces. I could mold the space the way I wanted it to, but I had a base for it to make it that felt lived in.
Yeah. No, it definitely comes across on screen. I think one of the reasons why I want to talk to you is because there are so many people who say, oh, I want to write a book, or I want to make a movie, or, and then they build the roadblocks along the way. Well, I don't have the funding. I don't have this. I don't have that. And is there sort of a moment in your creative life where you just said, essentially bleep it, I'm going to get it done no matter what? Like, is there a barrier you have to break through to kind of get to that side? Because I think it holds back an endless amount of people who maybe are creative and thoughtful and have a great story to tell in any medium, but they just can't get there.
Yeah. And it was definitely for me. I think, as I said, when I was told you don't have the budget to do this thing you want to do, this is your choice. You can either not make something or you can make something with this limitations, was that moment for me. Because I think up until that point, for artists, a lot of it is, I have a thing in my head. How can I put it in front of other people? But the thing is, the thing that's in our head is based on what we've experienced, what we've seen. And we watch movies that have much bigger budgets than we have. And so I think so I was trapped in that for a while. And it's one of the reasons why, my first feature film, I had, it's coming out now rather than earlier. Mm-hmm. And I think it was that moment where I was confronting with it. Okay, these are the resources I have. What can I do with this that still is beautiful about what I want to do? And, and I had, already kind of done some of the work at that point of saying, okay, who can I ask for money? Who are my partners? Who are my friends? So I think there is an aspect of, people don't look at, what resources they do have and, and put the work into like developing those relationships that are maybe necessary. But then oftentimes, again, that image they have in their head of what they want to do in their ideal world, it's the perfect becomes the enemy of the good. They don't say, oh, well, here's what I can do. Here's what I do have. What can I do with that? And once I was, kicked out of my delusions of what I could maybe do, I was able to actually create this story with what I could do.
Yeah. Talk about sort of the faith-based themes of the story without giving too much away, and why that's important to you, and why you think the culture needs that kind of storytelling.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, again, for me, one of the things, the movie is Jim versus the Future. It's about a grad student who gets kidnapped and held hostage by people from future timelines who each are competing timelines. They want to force him to make a choice that will preserve their future timeline at the expense of other people's. And of course, that choice is whether or not he's going to stay with or break up with his fiance. And I think for me, again, I don't see stories about, heroes who are doing their heroism from sort of a faith-based mechanism or metaphysics. Again, you have the Marvel heroes who are doing, superheroics and stuff like that, but they're doing that kind of in defiance of reality or in defiance of all authority, metaphysical authorities. Again, even in Eternals, it's like literally the gods who made us are evil and we have to rebel against them. And that just doesn't resonate with my experience. Again, the world I inhabit is sort of, shaped by the Bible and like C.S. Lewis, where it's like, if you are, you're fighting evil, you're fighting as a knight in the soldier of what is is a cosmic king. But a lot of the faith-based stories don't kind of do the C.S. Lewis route. They more do, here's a way in which we suck. Here's a plan God has for our lives. And if we, embrace his plan for our lives, then, we'll reconcile with people close to us. And there's no element of kind of the heroic, that our choices have some kind of triumph over cosmic evil in a way that I think is really satisfying. But again, like I said, the secular world is not doing it from a base of imagination that reflects either me or like most people kind of I know who are in the religious space. And I think, there's a lot of hunger right now for alternative narratives, I guess I could say, because a lot of people feel like the broad sweeping monoculture, first of all, it's just dying out. We're all splitting off into our various own internal stories, but it's not enough to kind of cohere us anymore. And so there's a lot of room for people to say, are there alternate stories we can tell about our lives and about the world? And I think there's an opportunity for religious people to say, well, we do have an alternate story about our lives, about the world, but maybe we haven't been doing well imagining that for other people as we could have. Again, we've been doing what I've been doing, which is being a film critic, which is criticizing other people's worldviews and saying, here, look at Bible. Here is alternate worldview. Maybe we haven't done the job of imagining in new ways for people how they can see their own ordinary lives being part of this cosmic struggle.
Gotcha. You're based in New York City, not the only filmmaker to be based there, certainly an artist haven through and through. Talk a little bit about why that feeds someone like yourself and so many other people. I was born in the Bronx. I grew up on Long Island. I have some New York roots and some sentiments and sensibilities about that. But I'm just, you could be anywhere at this point. It's one of the beauties of life now is that you could be in Chicago or a small city and then still create art and spread it far and wide. But obviously you're choosing New York City. What's as a storyteller, does it feed you? Does it exasperate you? Listen, New York does all the things, but I'm just curious what your take on it.
Yeah, I mean, the answer, like as you alluded to, is yes. It feeds me and exasperates me. But what I love about it is that you can have people right next to you who share your loves and your values. And again, there are so many Christians who live here, and they do that. I'm deep friends with them, and there are so many people who are passionate about creativity here. Mm-hmm. You can't go everywhere and have people who enjoy talking about ideas, who enjoy pursuing creative things, and who share your faith. Like, New York is this kind of place where everybody goes to kind of try to make the best version of themselves. And that includes all different kinds of people. So it's not just creatives. It's not just religious people. It's not just people who are interested in ideas. But believe me, they're here and you can find them. Whereas in other places, you're not able to find all of those people in one place. And so I think for me, that's really the opportunity is like, yeah, I could be making a film elsewhere. I could be going to church elsewhere. But the likelihood that a lot of my deepest relationships would be online with people who share my values rather than in person with people who share my values and interests. And I value that New York City gives me the opportunity to have in real life relationships with people who share those things.
That's right. Was it, they call it IRL?
Yes, exactly. Touch grass or touch concrete. Yes.
At the expense of looking ahead, and we obviously want to focus on Jim versus the future, but now that the film is proverbially in the can and it's out now, we'll get to that in a minute. Do you want to tell more stories? Have you kind of said, okay, I've got that feature film under my belt now? Obviously, the budgets are always there, but I did it, and now I can tell another story. I mean, how do you emerge as a storyteller after this experience?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it depends on, what opportunities I have in the future to make, movies and the kind of movies I have with those opportunities. Again, I made this movie because this is the budget that I could do, but I could tell the story that I wanted to tell. I always will want to tell stories, not just talk about them. I think making this was a beautiful, amazing experience. Because again, like I said, as a film critic and as a culture critic, as somebody who talks about ideas, I spend a lot of time looking at the ways that other people are imagining the world for us and saying, here's, what I liked about it or I didn't like about it. Here's where I think, got it wrong. A lot of what I do is I will compare stories being told to statistics and to sociology and say like, well, here's how this doesn't exactly map out on the way things actually are. But I also, there's a huge part of me, and this is the reason why I wanted to tell this story, is, well, what's another way of imagining the world I can share with other people that they can then comment on and tell me it's wrong in some way. Yeah. I want to be a part of that side of the conversation too. It is kind of funny. You're seeing all of these people in the kind of the YouTuber generation of people who are like, Chris Stuckman, who just came out with Shelby Oaks. And then I'm seeing a bunch of other people on TikTok, and the algorithm is feeding me since I got doing this film, all these other cultural commentators who are doing the same thing.
Yeah.
I think that and however I get to do that, whether opportunities God brings in my way or that I'm able to piece together to tell those stories, I want to be able to do that.
Yeah, it is fascinating, the process. And one of the joys of what we are experiencing right now is the ability to talk on a podcast, share on social media, and all of a sudden a creator who doesn't have the budget or the marketing savvy all of a sudden can reach out to the masses. And that must be very exciting as well. One last question. When you think about moving forward, what's been taking the money aside, because money's every independent filmmaker, money's an object and an issue, and they wish they had more. But what was the toughest part of this journey, as far as getting from I've got the script to I'm talking to people about it and spreading the word?
Yeah, I think the toughest part is not knowing what you don't know. The first time that you make a feature film is, again, people don't realize, and you as a film critic think that you realize everything that goes into making a film. And, whether it's the budgets, whether it's, the contracts, whether it's the marketing, whether it's, the relationships and dealing with all these things. This is stuff that you only learn by doing. And again, one of the things in the film is this idea of going from theory to actually living out real relationships. And that's where redemption lies. And I think that for me, one of the toughest parts was thinking I knew more than I did and learning, I'm having to learn a bunch of things on the job. Because one of the things about film is that it's a multi-artistic medium. It's, writing and camera and color and sound. And as the person who's directing all of this, you have to kind of be an expert in all of them. And so I think that's what people often don't realize is they think they know what film is and what it will take to do it. And you don't actually until you do it. And so that's why I always advise just do a lot of it and work with people who've done it more. And that's how you get halfway decent at doing it.
That's right. Well, you've done more than that. Of course, the film is Jim versus the Future. It is available now on DVD and digital outlets. I'll have the links in the show notes. You can check it out there. Congratulations! I mean, it's an amazing achievement just to make a film. I thought about script writing years and years ago. I kind of abandoned that. I always thought, well, maybe when I'm retired, I'll get back into it. Who knows? But you've done it, and I'm sure more is on the way. So, Joseph, congratulations on the film, and best of luck with future projects.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, if you follow me on Instagram or check me out on X, you probably know I love dogs, love dog movies. Also think that Aaron Eckhart is one of our more underrated actors. He's just terrific in everything he does. So when 2023's Muzzle came along, starring Aaron Eckhart as a cop working with a canine officer, I thought, yeah, I'm in. And it's good. It's a good, solid B movie. I love B movies, action movies that actually aspire to something more. They're not just straight ahead action. There's more meat on the bone, as they say, to kind of pursue the dog metaphor. Well, the director of that film, John Stalberg Jr., is back with Muzzle, City of Wolves. Of course, it's a sequel to that film. And again, starring Aaron Eckhart. It is in theaters right now, so do check it out. But John...
Why don't you just tell me what you want, and then you can shoot me.
You're going to shoot yourself?
But John's got some great stories to share about working with Aaron, about the corners he had to cut to make sure this movie was made, and also why it wasn't shot in LA, even though the story is set in LA. He really wanted to do it. But of course, the forces that be made that almost impossible. We'll get into that as well. And it's pretty eye-opening, I have to say. So here's my conversation with John Stalberg Jr., his new film, Muzzle, City of Wolves. Check it out. It's in theaters right now. And of course, thank you for listening. Well, John, thanks for joining the show. I'm a dog lover. I enjoyed Muzzle so much. I think Aaron Eckhart is a brilliant actor. You've got me in 6 different ways with City of Wolves here. But I want to just dial back real quickly, the origin of this whole concept. You saw a canine officer, you were intrigued by it, that was the spark. But tell us a little bit, obviously got to dig around a little bit with the subject, because I didn't even know that canine officers got full funeral treatments, or as dress funerals, I guess is the term. So maybe let's start there. What did you learn about this part of the police world that was intriguing to you?
Yeah, well, when I first saw that officer in New York, we just wrapped Crypto that we filmed with Kurt Russell. We were in Manhattan. I saw the canine officer talking, and as I pulled up alongside of him, revealed he was talking to his dog on the passenger seat. And I realized that these guys really consider their dogs their partners. They are also considered their weapons, but they're also considered their pets, because they train these dogs. What I found interesting, besides the full dress funerals for them, when a criminal or suspect assaults one of their dogs, it's an assault on a police officer. It's the attempted murder of a police officer. So criminally, in terms of the statutes, they're prosecuted as if they've, shot at a police officer. If they shoot at an attacking dog, the dogs are given full dress funerals. When they retire, they're given full retirement, proper celebrations, and they do announcements and everything, which is really touching. And they go viral on, you can see them on social media, people doing their sort of retirement. And the trainer, the handlers are usually very broken up about it, because it's like saying goodbye to a 10, 15-year partner relationship. But the thing about it is they spend all day when they're not on patrol, these guys, and they train all day. When we went to the actual training facilities, and they train their dogs to attack. And these dogs, it doesn't come naturally to them. They're badass dogs with unbelievable foot-pounds of pressure in their jaws, with fangs. I mean, they are really, really dangerous, but it's not their instinct to bite. So they train them to bite. And all day, bite suits, ropes, all kinds of things that they're doing. And they're training them to attack and be incredibly vicious. But then they bring them home to live with their families. I thought that was amazing, that you're training it all day. They're covered in scars, these officers, in real life, from accidental bites, and they have their toy. The dog wants nothing more than their toy. So these officers they carry Narcan, and because of all the fentanyl their dogs accidentally sniff up, right? And so they have Narcan for their dogs, which I found interesting, and all their gear. But also included in their gear is a dog toy. So they have this like little rubber, Kevlar dog toy, because these things are just so gnarly. And so they're always kind of, offering the dog toy. But these guys are they're these are their partners. So they're their confidant, partner, family member. It really almost transcends any relationship in law enforcement. It's very interesting.
Yeah, and both films obviously cover that so well. When Muzzle comes out, I'm sure. Listen, you live and breathe in films. You probably were thinking, I'd like to make a sequel, or were you at all, or were you just focused on the first one and thought, let me just get this done and make the best movie I can, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, the latter. I was thinking, let's get the best movie done, and it was about how we end the film. And so originally, Muzzle One had like a slightly more, I would say, bleak ending. It was a pretty misanthropic view of the world at the end.
Yeah.
But instead, what I did was I tried to contrast it because I had such a difficult experience making the first film for various reasons. And when I got back to LA, I realized I wasn't making a hate film of LA. I was making kind of a love story about LA in a way, because I kind of miss what it was in my hometown, and kind of it's got a disease to it. And although it's still incredibly fascinating, I still live here. So I must love it. So I had to kind of reconcile that with myself. And I ended the film on a sort of weirdly hopeful note with that 6th Street, or whatever it's called, that bridge, that brand new beautiful municipal piece of architecture they built over the city, even though we're revealing Jake as being sort of a callous psychopath, because he just switches off the radio listening to the bodies that he buried being discovered in the landfill. So we go, whoa, this guy's not broken up about it at all. He feels like justice was done. So he's a very morally ambiguous anti-hero kind of guy, even though he's trying to do the good thing, and he's talking to his son now. So that was a little bit bleak, but we ended it on this kind of weirdly kind of contradictory beat of there's optimism and a bleakness about his character.
Yeah.
And so when the sequel came around, we thought, well, now there's a lot of logical questions here to take the film to 2 and maybe 3 and maybe 4, in that it opens up a lot of questions. Okay, we left the film on these bodies being discovered. Okay, so what's happening with the investigation there?
Yeah.
He was on sort of effectively a suicide mission, was not wearing gloves, dropped a shotgun, going in to kill, and at the end he throws his gun down. He says, kill me. He's confronting all the suicidal ideation he'd been working through in these mandated psychiatry sessions by the LAPD. So now he survived it, and now he's got a kid on the other side, and a wife, and a girl he intends to marry. And so where does that go? Now he's a guy with all of this, those problems don't go away. So suicidal ideation, PTSD, these are things he's going to have to wrestle with now in the context of being a protector and a provider for his family. And that's fascinating. So we wanted to explore that. And the cartels in Mexico, who have these Skid Row street gangs distributing their narcotics product that they're cutting from all the story in Muzzle One, from the fentanyl coming in from China, and they're smuggling it up through the border. To kill one of your distributors would be the equivalent of someone killing like my French distributor who's releasing the film in Paris, or my Japanese distributor is releasing the film in Tokyo. I wouldn't be happy about it as the producer. So what would I do about it if someone went and killed my film distributors, one of them internationally? I would probably have something to say about it. So similarly, it raised natural questions of like, what would the cartels say about some rogue guy messing with their output deal?
It's one of those sequels where it really does flow nicely, and all the pieces kind of are snug in the way that they kind of connect. Real quickly, this film was shot in South Africa. I understand you wanted to shoot in LA. It didn't work out. There's been so much talk about, LA production moving elsewhere. Can you real quickly just describe, it must be maddening to you, because like you said, in a way, it's sort of a fractured love letter to the city, but you couldn't shoot it there. What are the key, I know it all boils down to money at the end of the day, but maybe just break it down a little bit, why it could be frustrating for a filmmaker like yourself with the best of intentions, where you think, I want to shoot it here, but then I can't.
It comes down to making the best movie possible. So when they say to me, if you shoot it in LA because of the crazy amounts of permit fees, the bureaucracy, the logistical nightmare, the unions, frankly, who are just committing highway robbery on productions left and right, and really spooking everyone off to run elsewhere when they mandate that you pay these exorbitant bonds and then they won't return them. And so people are getting spooked off, and for me as a filmmaker, I shot 2 splinter units in LA for Muzzle 1, Muzzle 2. So because I live here, I'm able to kind of say, oh, well, I could shoot that bridge. I could do it organically, and then I could cut that into a point of view shot, and you won't know that, it's not one of those things where I want to cut to like a stock footage shot of LA. And, I can do it really organically, but I had to steal all that footage. So I just stole it. I just drove around with my cinematographer. We jumped out of the car and we filmed the police precinct. And then I remember some criticism was like, oh, he's putting homeless people shooting up on the police precinct. That is the fakest thing I've ever seen. That was me just filming the police precinct. So I would film Skid Row, film the police precinct. It's all real. People say, oh, he puts tents everywhere. That's real. I'm just filming. And so now I'm just trying to match that. And so I go off to Africa because instead of getting 18 days to shoot in LA or 15 days with no rebates, the rebate system here is a lottery. That's ridiculous. You can't build a business on like playing Powerball. That's basically what it is. It's like, if you win the lottery, well, then how are you supposed to move towards pre-production if you're playing the lottery and twice a year? It's a ridiculous system. And so suddenly I have to go to Africa to shoot the meat of the film because I get 30 days to shoot versus 18. So that allows me to make a vastly better film. So I want to make a better film with more action and excitement and drama and performance, and take the time to get that right requires production time, which is expensive. So we go off to Africa, and I said, take me to the worst slums in Africa because I need to double for LA. And to my shock and horror, they weren't bad enough. So I had to bring in tents into these like shanty towns in Africa. And it was, it was kind of unbelievable. But, there were some people there that were glad to, great crews and stuff. They're glad to help me do it. And, so it was a beautiful experience being in Africa with a great crew, and met a bunch of beautiful, great creative people and amazing crew. It's like, oh, my grip was the guy who did Mad Max, and this guy just did this huge Mark Wahlberg movie, and my Steadicam operator was from this movie. It's like the drone crew just did Gore Verbinski's movie, and my assistant was Gore Verbinski's assistant from Good Night, Good Luck, Have Fun, Don't Die. And so it's like Ridley Scott was there doing Raised by Wolves, and months earlier, and his son, and it's a very like lively production community until of course their government just stepped in and put the kibosh on all production there and just said, we are pausing the rebate, and they still never paid the rebate back for this film. So they just like stomped on the brakes, and they had such great momentum there. So you just see governments like getting in the way and like messing up film production, and I'm sure they've got their own reasons, but from a film producer and director, I want to make badass, unapologetic cinema, and it's just hard to make it. So I'm going to go to where I can make it.
Yeah. And by the way, listen, I can understand if South Africa wants to go in this direction, but we're talking LA. I mean, LA is movies. LA is Hollywood. That's another level of frustration. I talked a little bit of Aaron Eckhart. He's such a good actor, and he's so committed. This is an action movie, but he doesn't give an action movie performance. He's really dialed in. And this is the second time, obviously, you're working with him. Just give a quick snapshot of what he's like behind the scenes, or what he brings to the film above and beyond, because it shows on screen.
He's as committed to this performance and this character as I am to the movie. So he is a very practiced and rehearsed guy. He works very hard at getting his stuff down so that he can seem very natural. And he has this ability to come across incredibly natural and affable, which makes the characters that he excels at, playing the kind of duality of man thing that he did so well in The Company of Men, and famously as Two-Face, playing this sort of like very likable, affable guy, but then the shadow side and what monster and animal in this case lies within all of us. The film is about a guy trying to control his animal, right? Control physically and emotionally, spiritually, psychologically. So we have a guy who is really dialed in terms of a method actor, where he's playing a dog trainer. So he wants to go there and bond with the dog. And he's got the script memorized from a year in advance. He's got on day one, he can do a monologue from the last day of shooting perfectly. So he's that kind of guy. He's always there on time. He knows all his that's not even a question. He's in character. So he's Jake Rosser, and he's working with the dog. So he allows me to pull the camera back, and I don't have animal handlers all around him with, signaling the dog and doing all the stuff that they typically do. He's controlling the dog. He's the one feeding the dog. He's the one rewarding the dog, bonding with the dog. So that stuff's really real. And so he finds a way to make stuff real. In terms of his action and his fight training stuff, like he's great at that and serious about it and wants to, have an audience of, military personnel, which we showed it to in DC. We showed it to active military and veterans. And he wants it to hold water for them, the way he holds a gun and moves tactically. And so all that stuff in terms of the action stuff is just the same way. It's like, make it real for the audience. The dog training, the fighting, the action, the fact that he's a combat veteran, a former cop. And then in the drama, trying to relate to his wife. And he can speak to his dog much more comfortably than he can communicate to his wife and admit to her the stuff that, he talks all about the war to his baby who can't respond, his dog, but to his wife who's there, she says, he says, I don't talk about it. He's conflicted, and he portrays that as committed as he does all the other stuff. So it is a great performance. He's a great actor. And it's not for lack of trying. The guy tries really, really hard.
It's funny, years ago, I interviewed Cesar Millan, the famous dog trainer, and he said to me in a moment of honesty, he said, actually, I deal and relate to dogs much better than people. So it kind of relates to Jake's character in the film.
Yeah.
One of the things that I love about your films is that I know this is a smaller budgeted production. It's not a massive blowout superhero movie, but your films always look good. They're rich. They've got great cinematography. And I always think in my head, if the big studios could hire someone like you, John, and just say, okay, can you reduce the budget and still make it look great? Like, I feel like, indie filmmakers are able to do that, especially in 2025. And yet these big studios just blow all the money. And yet I don't think your films look that vastly different at times. Is there a secret sauce to kind of doing more for less? Is it, maybe it's too big a question to even ask you, but
no, it's
just
great.
maybe just any thoughts on that?
Well, first I have to just give props to my cinematographer, Peter Vermeer. So the films of mine that maybe you've seen, Bad Hombres, Muzzle, Crypto, were shot by Peter Vermeer.
Yeah.
He's a fantastic cinematographer, and he's a good friend, and he takes it as seriously as I do. So we don't phone it in. We're not getting rich on these movies, but we're making these movies because we want them to be great, and we want a little bit more as we go, and we want to grow, and we want to continue doing it. I think when you get into the big studio thing, it's really difficult to kind of sneak in there, or like I said, steal footage or do stuff when you're a big studio, and you're also renting from yourself, and so there's synergistic components where you don't want to give your sister companies deals because you're trying to keep them afloat, and you've got shareholder stock price, you've got all of these other concerns with this sort of like behemoth that is a movie studio. You need to keep your sound stages occupied, so you book your movies in there, but you have to charge them the full freight. And so there's all kinds of stuff in terms of network operations and studio operations that is insanely complex and transcends my job as being a filmmaker. So I'm super gritty. Like I'll steal it. I'll just go shoot it. I'll go do it. And when you have a great DP, he can do things like, okay, we don't have $100,000 translite for New York City, when we shot Crypto, for example. So I called my friend who owned a hedge fund, and I said, hey man, can we shoot in your office in Manhattan? He went to high school with me. He was on my baseball team, and he said, yeah, man, go do it. So we got in there on a Sunday, and my cinematographer just said, if we shoot this with Manhattan in the background at 4:30, it's going to look like we had $100,000 lighting set up. And so we shoot it at 4:30, and Bo Knapp is in there at the boardroom at the end of Crypto. And it's just the most spectacularly beautiful thing you can imagine. And if you do it like that, incredibly resourcefully and creatively, because you have to, in filmmaking, it's weird. It's like the Jaws log and the Jaws experience is the famous story, but like the obstacle is the way. So if you don't have the time to shoot it, it's like, that's the obstacle, or you don't have the money to afford the light. That's the obstacle. Now that you don't avoid that, lean into that. And there's like magic in that. In Jaws, for example, the magic was the shark didn't work. They had Cornelius write the USS Indianapolis speech, and Jaws transcends an action movie and becomes one of the great films of all time. So you have to, it forces you into the situation where you have to overcome these insane obstacles, and through the overcoming of the weird obstacle as an indie filmmaker, that's where you find gold. When there's a famous thing where it just says you don't want enough rope where you're going to hang yourself. And I think with these massive bloated budgets, they you have an endless, so there's no obstacles, and therefore it's difficult to mine the magic.
It's so fascinating. I've heard that from many, many independent filmmakers who have similar stories where they make do, and often what they compromise with is even better than the original plan. Real quickly, it's funny, when I was growing up, I used to watch Star Trek, and whenever there's a fight scene, the camera would pull away, and you could tell it wasn't William Shatner duking it out because they had the stunt people in.
Right.
And I feel like modern actors really take pride in being more physical, being more capable. Is there kind of a push and pull on set when Aaron Eckhart's there and he wants to do something that maybe you're thinking maybe we should call in the stunt person, or talk a little bit about that, sort of that tension on the set? It's a good tension. Obviously, you're trying to make the best.
No, it's a great tension. Yeah, and Aaron he fight trains every day, so he's really physical. I mean, he's a few years older than me, but he's in incredibly good shape. And he knows how to do it. So he'll work with the stunt team, and we'll choreograph the whole, fights and action sequences together, whatever. And there's usually no question about it. Like if I'm throwing someone through drywall, 2 levels of drywall and wood through a glass table, this guy Aiden, one of our stuntmen, did the stunt for Jake when he comes through those walls and through a glass table. And when the glass exploded, he had to have surgery on his hand. It cut his whole hand open. There was blood all over the set. So there's certain moments where that wasn't even a question. When Jake has to jump out of a moving car at 35 miles an hour holding a dog, there wasn't even a question. And I have camera rigs hanging over the car. This was going to be Aiden, same guy. He did some amazing stuff for us. And then there's other things when it's fighting and physicality that we know Aaron's just going to do. And by the way, that's no picnic either. In the fight scene that happens in the kitchen, there was an accident and Aaron got his head cut open and was bleeding. And we thought, oh no, this is going to cause continuity issues. I believe the next scene was him in the hospital after he gets kicked in the face by one of the cops. So it actually made sense that he would have like a little bit of some swelling and a little bit of a shiner. So we just left it. Again, the obstacle is the way, but he, he wants to do it all. He wants to make it real. And I'm with you, like cutting wide is almost unintentionally funny sometimes. So it works in comedies when you do it, when you cut wide and the guy does, what the stunt guys call a fart knocker. That's like one of those bad falls. But in an action movie, especially one that's supposed to be thrilling and dramatic, you have to be careful about doing that stuff, because if you take the audience out of it, you've failed.
Yeah. I want to get a quick sense of where you are as a filmmaker working in 2025 today. Hollywood is changing so dramatically. There's streaming, there's digital, as the threat of AI. There's, increasing costs. There's new places to watch everything you produce. Do you feel emboldened by this culture in Hollywood where there's so much change? Is it a little frightening for you as a storyteller? You wonder if you'll get the opportunities moving forward. Where is it? Do you have a different feel every day? I'm just kind of curious, where you stand right now. It just, there's so much flux going on.
Yeah, there is. Wait, there's culture in Hollywood? No, no. There is a lot of things. I feel good about it, and I'll tell you why. Because all of this AI is kind of fun and wild, and it's a novelty, and it's great. And I feel there's an instantaneous artistic revolution that it almost happened organically with the audience and the filmmakers. And I've seen an instantaneous rejection of anything artificially generated with AI. People don't want to pay to go sit in the theater to watch that. They just don't. And everyone knows it. And the filmmakers instantaneously knew it. I remember watching a clip of the new Spider-Man, and they actually have the stunt guy in this crazy rig flying through the city practically as it's blowing up practically. And I was like, that's amazing, because of all this sort of CG stuff reached this kind of pinnacle. And now you can press a button and see Spider-Man flying through the city and it's fake. Well, now let's see it for real. And that's the sort of allure that Christopher Nolan has, like doing everything in camera for Oppenheimer, doing everything real. I mean, those were all in camera things he was doing with the atomic particles and all that stuff. It was kind of really incredible. And so I feel like there's this immediate bragging rights when you're like, all our stunts are real. We use no visual effects. All the camera effects are in camera. All of the muzzle flashes and the gunfights and the squibs are real. We did all that in Muzzle. There was the occasional moment where we had to tweak it because there was an animal or something. But for the most part, we've always done that in Muzzle 1, in Bad Hombres. All that stuff is practical. And so there's like a premium on that. And I think that's cool. And the more that AI gets pushed out, the more there's a premium on doing the difficult stuff. Like they really blew this building up. They really blew that car up. I mean, we did all that stuff practical. And it's like bragging rights. It's cool.
Yeah. No, and you, even if you don't think of it like you don't try to think of it, you recognize it. Your brain sort of processes it in a different way, which is I think why this return to practical effects is so important. One last question, the obvious one: a third Muzzle outing. The ending of this film, I don't even go near describing it, but it's interesting. It could go in a very fascinating direction. Is it in the works? I mean, you have to wait for box office receipts. What's the status of that?
Yeah, that's all true. But we originally, when they studio called and said they wanted a sequel, we designed 2 and 3, and we even designed it to be done together. And then there was a decision that we should do them separate and let's just focus on 2. And that's what we did. So we focused on 2. There is part 3. It's scripted and Aaron is attached, and we have it all ready to go. And it's the best one yet. It's like amazing. It picks up where 2 leaves off exactly. And you know that Jake is painted into a really tight spot. But the thing about it, like I said about filmmaking, is like the tighter of a spot you're painted in, the more you're forced to come up with something brilliant to get out of it. And when you put a character in a position where we said, how is he going to get out of this now? This is, and now we were then forced to figure out a way to get him out. And it's pretty cool. Jacob, who wrote the second one, Jacob King, he wrote the third, and it's incredible. So I really hope we get the opportunity to make it this year.
Gotcha. Well, I hope so too. But before then, of course, you have to go out and see Muzzle City of Wolves in theaters right now, and a theater near you. John, thanks so much for taking the time to speak to me. I really enjoy your films, and give our best to Aaron Eckhart. He's just terrific. I met him years ago on a junket for another film, but he's the real deal, man. He's just and I think he's in his 50s. He looks like he's 35, so I don't know what he's doing, but he's doing something right. So
I'll tell you,
as a 50-something, I'm a little jealous. That's all.
Well, I'll tell you the one thing that he's doing, like we're talking about, and I know we got to go, but the pushback, like we're saying, the thing that he doesn't do is he looks like a real guy in his 50s to a certain degree, and that's what's refreshing about him. He looks great, but he's got wrinkles, and he doesn't look like he's had a facelift, and he looks like a real man. And that is appealing to me when I'm casting a guy who's a former Marine, an LAPD cop, who's, lives in Ventura County. It's like that guy didn't get a facelift. So Aaron looks awesome because he looks like the way a man's supposed to look. And that's very important. So there's that. And I will give him your best. And he's a great actor, underrated. And go see the film November 14th, this Friday in theaters.
Yeah. Excellent. Thanks again for your time, and hope we can talk soon.
I appreciate it, Christian. Thank you so much.
Your character actor of the week is the late, great Charles Durning. Well, that's it for the Hollywood and Toto podcast this week. Again, thank you to Radio America for having me as part of that great podcast lineup. And do check out HollywoodInToto.com. It is my website now in its 11th year. All the news, reviews, and commentary from a right-of-center perspective, kind of like this podcast. And of course, we don't want to push away our liberal friends. There's lots of apolitical stuff there as well. But I don't think we throw any nasty comments along the way. I think we keep things fair and square, try to be as journalistically proud and sound as possible. So do check it out. But again, when you think about Hollywood coverage, it's almost uniformly from the left. We are, I hope, a breath of fresh air in that regard.
Hallelujah.
So again, thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing the show. If you haven't, well, shame on you, but I understand it. Life is busy. But of course, have a wonderful week. Doctor's orders.